everyone, welcome to another live edition of the Comic Vault. I'm your host, Captain Logan, and tonight we're talking about the Ultimates Volume 1 from 2002, and let me introduce my co-host. It's Browncoat Eric.
I got introduced first!
You did, yeah, because that's where
I
your
took all
box
your
is.
haters, Steve, and now I get introduced first!
The hate gives him the power. And it's Steve Baxi.
At least I don't have to watch Gotham, so I guess I win something.
Yeah, that video's going up tonight. This week was interesting.
I'm excited to see that. I always wait with bated breath to see Eric's.
It's so much fun.
See, that's why I have to keep
Gotham
getting later and
Vlog.
later. I just want to make you wait longer and longer.
Ah, that sucks. So tonight we're talking about the Ultimates, sort of weirdly a follow-up to the Civil War live show we did a couple weeks ago. I realize that this, is a thing that came out first, but it's also a Mark Millar thing. And I guess we're sort of unintentionally doing a Mark Millar series of live vaults right now, because we did Civil
First
War.
is kind of wrong. This book took so long to come out. I think Civil War actually comes out during this book.
Does it really?
I think so. If not this, it comes out during Ultimates 2.
It probably was the Ultimates too, because I feel like this stopped around 2004 or 5, which would be right around the time Civil War would be getting started, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Was it just really late, Eric?
Yeah, Brian Hitch is always late. Ultimates 2 is so late that it starts with one Secretary of State because they use the real live people, and ends with a different Secretary of State.
That's hilarious. Does it pretend like that much time has passed, or is it just like, we have to use this one?
Ultimates 2 takes place over the span of maybe a month.
And this doesn't take, this doesn't happen over the span of very much time.
No.
Nope.
Nope, it's just not Mark Millar, just Brian Hitch is just, he's one of those artists that he just takes a real long time.
So as I said, we're kind of unintentionally doing a series on Mark Millar Marvel stuff. Mark Millar Marvel stuff that has majorly influenced the Marvel Cinematic movies. And Eric chose this, I think, primarily because Eric's been begging us for the last several weeks to do Ultimates. And I think, Eric, you mostly chose this so that we could hurry up and review this to get to Ultimates 2.
No, I want to talk about Ultimates 2. And like, if it was just Steve and I, we could do just Ultimates 2, but you can't just jump into Ultimates 2. You have to read Ultimates first. And I knew you hadn't read it. So yeah, we're doing this so that we can do Ultimates 2.
Well, and I appreciate that, Eric, because I'm really glad I've read this now because of how much it informed the movies. And of course, when you and I were talking about this the other day, you said you're going to be really interested to see what the experience I have with this going backwards, because anybody that read this stuff and then saw the movies would be like, okay, and they borrowed this, and here's some things that are similar. And this, I'm of course going the other way, and I've made an entire list of things that the movies borrowed from this or that reminded me of them and that I wondered about. And there are some uncanny coincidences that had to have been coincidental.
Well, it should be noted that Joss Whedon does the foreword to the hardcover. Joss Whedon is a huge fan of the series and is aware it exists.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting, too. But there are... Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and lead with this. The main big coincidence I noticed was the name drop of Robert Downey, which can't be anything but coincidence, because this is at least, and I think that's in the first couple issues. So if they both came out as early as 2002, then it's 6 years before that happens, and there's a mention of him being an alcoholic, and that's at this time kind of what the big thing he's known for, unfortunately. And what's really interesting is then later on there's a lengthy scene of characters amusingly, and it's a lot of fun, and people always talk about it, casting, and I think that's one of the big things this is known for now, casting themselves in Marvel movies, and of course Robert Downey doesn't come up, then that's not the place he comes up at, and the only one they nail is Sam Jackson, which I think is a really famous panel now. It comes up, you like see it all over the internet, where he says, who would you cast as yourself, Nick Fury? Oh, well, obviously the only possible answer, Samuel L. Jackson, who his likeness is clearly based on, and his dialogue is also like spot on Sam Jackson, like all the way through. I can't help but have a Sam Jackson voice in my head, and I think that anybody that knew Sam Jackson reading this would have still had exactly the same voice in their head, and then he just becomes Nick Fury later and is in like 5 movies now.
Yeah, it is actually legally based on him. They actually like asked him if they could base the design on Sam Jackson.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. And there's like a weird clause with that agreement that he would get to like at least like audition for Nick Fury in a potential movie kind of a thing.
Wow, yeah. It would have been really weird if he had auditioned and they picked someone else. I don't know. I don't know who else is more right for a part based on you. And again, who talks exactly like you? Like, I'll find it. I have a couple of notes here of things where I'm like, that sounds exactly like Nick Fury. Like when he says, in the second issue, he's got this line where he says, "Man," just saying "man" immediately makes you sound more like Sam. He says, "Man, heading S.H.I.E.L.D. is like being the Pope, the Queen, and the President of the United States all rolled into one." I'm like, that's a Sam Jackson line. And it just keeps happening.
Yeah. It is in fact intentional.
I also liked a tracking system that could find a Democrat in Texas.
That's a good one.
There's a lot of good ones.
I should probably say that is my favorite thing about this book is I think this is the most spot on I've seen Mark Millar, and as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of him usually, and this is I guess kind of earlier Mark Millar. He's got a distinct voice for all these characters, and I just kept writing down lines of dialogue that I thought were like really distinct for particular characters, or were just really clever and quippy and amusing things, and it kind of makes it more. I don't know. I kind of like didn't mind the ultra political nature of this as much because everybody's talking so much like real people, and it kind of feels more like our real world. And so I got what he was doing from a very early place. Although it got way more disturbing and shocking than I thought it was going to.
Oh wait till Ultimates 2.
This gets shocking.
Really? Wow. I don't know, man. The domestic violence thing I did not see coming at all.
Oh, we have to talk about that. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely we do. Anyway, so I mean, I guess I'm just kind of giving my general thoughts right up front. I did really enjoy this. There's stuff I don't like. There's characterization stuff here and there that I don't really care for. But this is maybe to date the most fun I've had with the Mark Millar thing.
I think the Ultimates is maybe the best thing he's done, being Ultimates and Ultimates 2. I think Ultimates 2 is the pinnacle of both his and Brian Hitch's career. I think that's the best either of them are. I like some Mark Millar stuff, and I don't like some other stuff. But this is definitely on the higher echelon of his work.
I also think Brian Hitch's art in this is pretty spectacular, with the exception of a few weird facial expressions here and there that I just didn't buy. But there's some full page spreads that are just amazing, especially Captain America. He loves putting Captain America in a full page spread.
Yeah,
just any chance he gets. So anyway, that's kind of opening general thoughts from a person that has never read this and literally just got finished with it like minutes ago, because I did not give myself nearly enough time to read this book. And sorry we're a little bit late tonight. I, for some reason, had it in my head that this was shorter than it was, and then I didn't expect issue 13 to be 42 pages long. And I was taking my time and taking notes, and there was a lie. Like, I felt like it was a book that was worth like slowing down and taking my time with, and then all of a sudden it was time to do a show. So anyway, where do you guys want to start? Past those initial thoughts.
I want to start with just the idea of it being a re-envisioning of the Avengers.
Yeah.
I don't think we will ever get something as pure, and I don't want to say deconstructionist, but like this is clearly someone looking at everything and just picking the elements he works and getting rid of the things that don't work. Like Bucky is not a sidekick in this. I don't think you will ever get an interpretation of Captain America without Bucky again. I don't know if either Marvel or DC would ever take the kind of risks that this takes with interpreting and updating the characters to the modern day.
Especially with the way they advertise this, right? Like, this was a pretty big thing. The Ultimate Universe for a while was massive at Marvel. And starting it with not only Ultimate Spider-Man, but then evolving it into, like, these really political, extremely dark and violent Ultimate stuff, it's not something you get every day, at least not as pushed as things later become.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious that this would then later influence Bendis' Avengers.
Oh yeah, it would influence Bendis' Avengers. There's some stuff here that Brubaker picks from in his other career, like at Image and stuff.
Well, we have to talk about his response issue.
We do. Let's talk about the France thing. The France thing's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought that was great.
Brubaker has to think about it. Brubaker, because he's so much more about writing Captain America as like a character that's been through a war, and there's lots of fun historical context stuff there. He wrote an entire issue of his Captain America run that validated the French's efforts in World War II as a direct response to them being insulted in this book.
Yeah, there is an entire issue in Brubaker's run of Cap that is just him saying, no, Captain America would not have made that France joke. That is a modern joke. That's not something that Captain America from World War II would say.
Well, at the very, very least, has Captain America been around long enough to develop that kind of a viewpoint about that country?
No, but I think the way that it's written in this book is that would have been the viewpoint of the time. And Brubaker's issue is about, no, you wouldn't have that viewpoint in World War II.
Yeah, I'm not sure he would either. I also think it's important to note that intentional or otherwise, and I think it's got to be intentional, this is a book that, and I think this is true of a lot of his stuff, but also the Ultimate stuff in general, that is not timeless. This is a book very much meant for the time that you're reading it in.
Yeah, whenever I give this book to people...
Sorry. Now as they would have back then.
I'm sorry, what, Steve?
There's just a lot of jokes and one-liners and character references here that wouldn't play as well now as they do back then. Like, all the celebrity name drops and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of stuff just randomly spread through both of these, or I have 2 volumes, but through all 13 issues that try to make it feel really realistic, but the problem is that there's stuff like Sharon Elizabeth and, like, references that people either would not get anymore or don't mean the same thing as they used to.
Sharon Elizabeth is the one whenever I give this book to someone, I'm like, this book is really good. You have to understand it came out in the early 2000s, and so there's a lot of weird stuff like pretending Sharon Elizabeth matters.
And I found myself comparing it a little bit to Why the Last Man, which I've also been reading and reviewing lately, and it came out at the same time as this, or at least it started at the same time as this, and that's a book that has the same thing, where it's very much set in the time that it's in and for the readers from that period, reading it when it comes out, but the difference is it reads like a period piece and like an alternate history, because it's like, what if all the men died in this year, and so it's a little bit easier to go back and read it that way. And of course, a lot of the politics and societal stuff, that Vaughn does in that still matters a lot now, and so some of it reads exactly the way it would have then. But this reads a lot more like, I don't want to say it's like thorough literature. That's like because there's still some poignant stuff certainly that would hit now, but some of and like, it's not pandering, I don't know what the right word is, but like it's very much with the references, the pop culture references and stuff, supposed to appeal to that crowd right then and say, this is not your father's Avengers. Like, that's kind of the idea. Well, and Ultimate Spider-Man is that way too, except not as pop culture, hard hitting, I don't think.
Well, I think it's more supposed to be, this is the real world right now. And it should be noted.
But like the whole idea of
it should be noted, Marvel comics are littered with this. Like, when you go backwards, they constantly reference actors that I don't know who they are. Like, they didn't stand the test of time. Stan Lee does that all the time.
Yeah.
And Millar has said
that he
was intentionally doing.
Yeah, I don't know why it leaps out at me more here than it does with that stuff.
I think it's because you don't know what the references are, so they don't feel dated to you. It's just like, that's a reference to some actor at the time. It's not as
it's because I do, and they're actors that have like kind of stood the test of time, and I feel like everybody knows. Because I know my 60s and 70s fairly well, I think. Like,
yeah. I think it's because, like, I think you know, in 10, 15 years, if Jason were to read this,
Yeah.
I think he might have a less adverse reaction to all those pop culture references because they wouldn't be as like that. He's not going to remember when those were a thing.
Well, and maybe it is because it's so politically charged, right? Because, like, Stan Lee was writing stuff that was supposed to, you know, way sort of feel like the real world, of course, and he talks about that. But this, we physically have Betty. I think it's or is it Janet? Janet going on a date with Freddie Prinze Jr.
It's Betty.
Is that Betty? We bring that's right. We bring that culture into the story. Like, we bring those real people right into it, and we're dealing with you know, President Bush directly, and it's the world it was right then, and like some of those references and things aren't just references. Like, they actually matter for the plot and ideas and themes of the story.
Yeah.
I think part of it is, like, if you read those references without knowing the people, but just knowing that they are references to pop culture things, there's almost like a satirical commercialist perspective from this book. Like, there's a lot of moments here where you get random lines like, "Giant man's a wife beater, how do we sell his toys now?" Like, it's trying really hard to not only ground you in the culture of the time that this was written in, but to be more critical about, like, what superhero comics have become around that time period, and how politics and actual political events have changed the way we tell these stories and what these characters are supposed to represent. A lot of it is more literal later on, like in Ultimates 2, but this one almost reads completely like satire for most of the book.
Well, and does, like, something like the Freddie Prinze Jr. bit, does that work as well if it's a fictional movie star that we have to explain is famous?
Yeah, maybe not. And as Steve said, like, it's set in the real world for a reason. You know, to go along with what you're talking about, Steve, it's kind of it's also about, like, where are our priorities with our superhero characters? Like, are they actually heroic, or could they actually be heroic? You know, that kind of thing. What really is the point of them in the culture? And I think that there's a reason that we have that 2-3 page discussion about, like, who would play these characters in movies, and because, like, if they're living in the world we're living in, their priority isn't really to save the world. And Thor kind of has a point. He's an extremist, just like Nick Fury is on the other side, but he actually has a point. And then when you get to the end and you find out what the aliens are actually doing and all of that, suddenly Thor doesn't seem as much like a crackpot as you thought maybe he was.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to that thing with them just talking about the actors and you put these extremes, it puts some of the stuff earlier on into context, because from the very beginning, before this is about saving the world, this is about commercializing people, about, like, having, like, training sessions that the media can look at, and kind of just showing off these characters.
Well, we keep talking about PR.
Yeah, well, that's what Betty's job is in this comic.
Right.
Is she's the PR agent.
Yeah. There's a lot of
and they talk about spin doctoring.
As opposed to, does it matter?
I'm sorry, what, Steve?
There's a lot of, like, how does this look, as opposed to, like, whether or not this matters going on in the book, especially with stuff like Janet and Hank, like, their whole relationship, what is it on the outside versus what it actually is on the inside, partly because of the world they live in.
Well, and that while the immediate team members of the Ultimates are concerned for Janet, everyone that works in S.H.I.E.L.D. is just concerned about how it makes them look.
Exactly.
How do we spin this so it doesn't look like we put a wife beater on our team?
Exactly.
And there's a parallel there with Banner and Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't really care as much, because Banner is also really hurt, and they're not as concerned about him as they are making sure that, and, like, the reason that they save him from prosecution is not for his own benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when we talked about Civil War, well, kind of about Ultron, you know, Steve and I were saying that nobody knows that Tony created Ultron, and I kept thinking of this series with Hulk, how, you know, Bruce Banner, the Ultimates, S.H.I.E.L.D. are all responsible for this massive destructive event, and then they just kind of sweep it under the rug, and they don't let anyone know that Bruce Banner is the Hulk.
And then they even like they even try to spin it to make it seem worse in place. Like there's that scene at the opening of issue 7 where Betty's like, "This is great having Captain America give the eulogy. I thought this whole cheesy soldier crap wouldn't work, but it does, and it's all about making these people interact with the world and spinning the political agenda and people's feelings as opposed to actually fixing anything." And then Bruce Banner even gets pretty mad about that towards the end, or at least depressed about it.
Early on, I thought it was really interesting that the looming threat is that there isn't one.
Yeah.
And that
and they might lose funding.
The tension that is built for about 4 issues, like it's I think a full 4, if not 3 into 4, before finally there's a threat, and it's a manufactured threat that Bruce Banner makes up on his own on purpose. He injects himself with Captain America's blood mixed with the Hulk stuff and turns himself into the Hulk again. And it turns out that he does that on purpose. And Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. have kind of created this monster, literally, because he knows that what they really need is a threat that will make them look really good. And so, weirdly, I find myself... especially whenever I'm duped into really enjoying and liking Nick Fury, and you know he's got a lot of things to like about him, even though he's very much this political machine. I find myself by second or third issue like feeling really tense because we don't have a threat yet, and I'm like, what these people really need is something to fight, and then I find myself like getting on their side and thinking, wow, there really needs to be some bad guy that's killing people. And then when that finally happens, you're like, oh, I have been accidentally duped into wanting bad things to happen. But it's because I'm reading a story and there's supposed to be a conflict, but there already is a conflict, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, some of that's interesting because it's just the idea of like you get a nuclear missile, then everyone else wants a nuclear missile. The Avengers or the Ultimates in this get formed, and part of the immediate consequence is, well, other people are going to be intimidated or afraid by this. And by the end of this, we do have the Chitauri, so it's validated that they have it. But by the time we get to Ultimates 2, it's exactly about that effect of by having the Ultimates, like Vision says in Civil War, it invites challenge, it invites conflict.
Well, and what's interesting is that turns out to be true, but Fury's argument is flawed in the first place because he says we have super people, and so we now have super terrorists and super crime, and so we need something, but we haven't had more than one example of that yet.
Well, this book is really this book is really strongly post 9/11. Like there's kind of no way around that with this book, and I think because they talk about Magneto. Magneto is the only time we've ever had a massive supervillain. And it would kind of be like if after 9/11 we put all of our money and resources into a massive task force to protect our country.
Good point.
And then we never had another attack.
Well, and I found myself preoccupied toward the end by the thought of what would it be like in the real world if 9/11 happened and the very next year you had an alien invasion?
Or the Hulk, because the Hulk is kind of a 9/11 level threat in this.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, by the way, that's something I was never clear on with this book, where if Magneto's supposed to be the first threat, how come they make all this reference to the Hulk getting out beforehand? Did that not count as, like, a terrorist attack, or was it all, like, concealed and it didn't actually do any damage?
Yeah, I wondered about that too, because I haven't read all the other stuff, obviously, from the Ultimate Universe. So, like, was there a Hulk book before this, or something where the Hulk showed up, or is it making that up?
There's a comic called Ultimate Team Up, and the Hulk and Spider-Man teams up with the Hulk in that. But that book's weird because, like, Spider-Man teams up with Iron Man, but it is not Ultimate Iron Man because he hadn't been created yet, and so there's a lot of weird, wonky continuity in the early days of the Ultimates.
Yeah, like there's Fantastic Four, there's X-Men, there's Spider-Man stuff that all builds before this, and then some of that continuity does not gel with this book, and then going forward they try to rectify it.
Well, so, I think this is before before Ultimate Fantastic Four.
I think Ultimate Fantastic Four starts before this. I think Ultimate Fantastic Four starts like right after Spider-Man, doesn't it?
No, I don't think, because there's a major continuity issue with the Fantastic Four where I think it's the Ultimates. They reference the Fantastic Four as already being in existence as a team, and then in Fantastic Four, Johnny Storm says he wants to be a member of the Ultimates. And so
Okay,
both of
it
these
might be
books
like
act like
during
the
this
other
then,
book
because
already
it's close
happened.
late. Maybe that book was created during this thing's original run.
Yeah. I'm never really sure on the timeline of when Ultimates books came out in relation to each other.
That's interesting because the Fantastic Four is one of the groups that they're like, yeah, that would be a PR nightmare. We can't go after them and ask for their help.
Yeah, and then if you go read Ultimate Fantastic Four, it's a ground up story, and the Ultimates already exist in that universe, and it's a continuity error.
Weird.
Yeah, I do know that the Magneto stuff
Yeah.
does in fact happen in Ultimate X-Men.
Yes, that does. I have read that.
That's the first arc.
If you guys don't mind, as we go along, there's a few kind of random side notes I'll want to point out about certain things here and there. One of them, as we're talking about Banner, is there's a line in the second issue where I think it's Fury who says, "Crack open the bottle of champagne you've been saving for the next season of Star Trek." This is 2002, and I just don't see Banner being that big of an Enterprise fan, especially based on season 1, which is not very good.
That's funny. I didn't even know there was Star Trek on the air when this was out. That's fun.
Oh yeah. Star Trek had a continual 17-year run from 1987 to 2005.
2005. Okay, that's funny. I think we lost Eric.
My Star Trek references always shut Eric down. It just shuts him down.
I just got a message from him. Yep, he got kicked out by accident.
Oh, that sucks. Okay, well, what do you want to talk about next, Steve? Should we go more on Banner? Should we talk about Banner and Betty's relationship?
We should talk a little bit about that. Before that, I do want to mention, this does tie into the Hulk stuff, but there's another exchange. Issue 7 is one of the most interesting for a lot of the satire stuff. Another part in Issue 7, there's a moment where Bucky shows up, and Bucky is talking to Captain America, and he says something like that we can't trust the X-Men, we can't trust that Spider-Man guy, but thanks for dropping a tank on the Hulk and stomping his face into the ground. It's really interesting that this Captain America is not. I wouldn't say he's a good person. I don't.
I can't decide. And what bothers me about that, Steve, is, and there are certain characters we'll have to talk about that I think are potentially like completely unsympathetic and reprehensible, and I don't know if the book is earning that. And if it's not that, and that's where I often end up not liking Millar that much, where people are kind of unlikable for the sake of shock value, and then because we know he's a really cynical guy, he's saying this is what people are like.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I don't think he's saying that's what people are like. I feel like this whole book, by the end, because when you get to the final issue, when you get to the alien stuff, it basically just becomes one big jingoistic, hyper-masculine slugfest. And I think that's the point. I think by the end of this book is that most of these people are not good people. They come together because they kind of have to, but it is more satirical. It is more about the fact that because superheroes are created as things that need to be perpetuated by their companies, because there's an element of entertainment stuck in with an element of always be political and always be accurate to the time, and then there's an element of wish fulfillment. Like these characters are horrible people because they're an extension of everything we kind of negatively put on top of them. So, like, Hank Pym's not a good person. I don't think Captain America's really a good person either. I think most of the people in this book, even Betty Ross, I think Betty Ross is a horrible person for most of this. But I think that's sort of the point. And then Ultimates 2 rectify some of that.
Well, can I argue with you a little bit and say that I think you're going a little bit too far with that. I think that he's straddling the fence on it, and I think that he's bringing. And I mean, like, see, this is based too much on stuff that I read from later. I want to say he's bringing his regular sensibilities to this, but writing in a more mainstream thing. So he's got some of his characters acting like that, but then he's trying really hard to make other people more sympathetic. And I think there are some characters that I meant to like more and relate to more and understand why they have gone the way they have, and I just don't. I'm not sure it's all satire. I think there's an element of satire, and I also think there's an element of just regular dramatic storytelling. I think Tony Stark is a very likable and a sympathetic person.
No, I agree with that. I think it's that the satire is what we start with, and then these characters are going to become that through the lines. There's like cracks of it to begin with. Like Iron Man's there to a degree, and then Captain America sort of gets.
Well, there's certainly a bookend with the Hulk thing, where it definitely starts and ends with that, because you have you have manufactured threat, and then by the end they have to take out the manufactured threat again.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's quite a bit here where like because Eric's gonna come back and he's gonna mention this is his computer blue screen. He'll be back in like 5 minutes, but
I hope he's able to get back in here. Yeah.
There's a bit of this book where the first like 5 or 6 issues it was meant to be an ongoing, and then it became a 13-issue miniseries. And then the subsequent sequels all became like 13-issue minis. But the stuff with the Hulk, I think at the start of this, the satire and the actual character drama was supposed to be intermixed. We were supposed to like very slowly build on those ideas, and then by the end, it all just kind of gets thrown in your face, and it becomes more direct and becomes more one complete story. But the disconnect is in that the writing style shifts halfway through because Millar has to go from writing an ongoing to writing a mini.
Yeah.
Or a maxi. I think 12 issues are called maxis, but whatever.
Yeah, by the time you get to 10 or 12, it's a maxi before it's a mini. Yeah.
Yeah. 12 issues just don't seem like a lot to me anymore, but yeah.
And then this is 13 where it feels like you have I don't want to say tacked on, but you have like this big like 40-something page last issue that kind of ties everything up, and I'm glad that it's longer because it didn't feel, the ending actually didn't feel that rushed, except for maybe the way they took out the Hulk.
Yeah. The Hulk does go down a little bit quick. I do like Hawkeye in this. Ultimate Hawkeye is a really interesting character, and we get some great stuff with him later on. I love that he has to like concentrate and get close to people.
I didn't really get much of a sense of his character yet because I had to kind of speed through the last couple issues, and he and Natasha show up late.
Yeah, they show up much later. They show up like issue 8 or 9, I think. But they become bigger characters.
That Black Ops mission that takes up the first half of 8 or 9 or wherever it is, that's thrilling. That's some of the best art in the series, I think.
Yeah, and then the whole idea of just going through and shooting through like an office building reminds me of Wanted, which Millar also wrote.
Oh yeah, good call. And they are straight up taking people out, like
yeah,
with extreme prejudice. Like the way the arrows are flying and stuff, like it's violent.
Oh yeah, and it all looks great. It's all Brian Hitch's art, and it's all fantastic. And I can see why it took him a while to actually draw this whole thing. Ultimates 2's got like this 5 or 6 page fold out of one massive action scene that would take forever to draw.
I will say I like their banter a whole lot. Also, that bit where Hawkeye is talking about how like Black Widow had all this training and she is enhanced. I always have to remind myself that in comics she's sometimes enhanced because in the movies she's just trained by the Soviets, and like I don't think she's actually supposed to be superhuman in the movies, even though she does things that look like they would have to be done by somebody that was super soldier level caliber. But he's got that line where he's like, look, you can. And then it makes a parallel to her and Tony Stark, where he's like, "Look, I can't do this stuff and talk at the same time," and I just think that's hilarious.
Yeah, no, I really like that. Oh, there's thunder outside. Okay. But no, there's
watch out for those Sharknadoes again, Steve.
Hopefully not a Sharknado. But no, there's lots of good banter throughout this. Nick Fury and Steve Rogers towards the end, I think, have pretty good dialogue, some good exchanges there. And even though the France line sparked a pretty massive response from Brubaker, I think that whole fight between Kaiser, who might as well have been Red Skull, I don't know why he's not Red Skull, Kaiser and Steve Rogers, this fight has some really good dialogue.
I wondered why he wasn't Red Skull also, and I thought it would have been well, okay, this would be rewriting it, but I just thought of this. Wouldn't it be neat if the Chitauri just all looked like Red Skull?
That would be interesting. Red Skull does show up later in Ultimate Avengers.
Because they're shapeshifters, right? And so he could like pretend to be a regular human guy, and then he turns into his regular form, which is Red Skull. But I also like that these guys, that the Chitauri aren't humanoid, like they're big grotesque monster things.
Yeah, they're big grotesque monsters. There's very like a clear dehumanization of them, so we can just attack them without consequence, which is something that comes up again later in Ultimates 2.
That's absolutely right. Now, do you think that it is kind of too convenient that we're waiting around for a threat, and then suddenly we have a threat, and it also happens to connect up really nice and neat to the last thing Captain America did before he went in the ice? Like, because like I said, I had to read that stuff pretty quickly. Did I miss something where something about his coming out of the ice had something to do with their showing up when they did, or was it just? I don't think it does. It seems like it's just that Hydra thing from, and again, I'll go down my list later of stuff that is just like the movies or that the movies took from this. But the Chitauri are really similar to Hydra infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, you're right. Because they're all over the place. They're already like interconnected to like political institutions and such.
And they're they're introducing technologies and things and taking over. So and that's where I said that Thor ends up kind of having a point. One of the ideas that really got me toward the end was when the main Chitauri guy says that they're going to go to the next phase of the cell phone plan. And that they're using cell phones to give people cancer and lobotomize people?
Yeah. No, that's really... You'd almost figure that in movies, and then there's also just some fun, like... there are spy movies that do that later, where that like, have the cell phones that kill you or, like, give you cancer or something like that. And
Thor had just said in a few issues earlier, he was talking about the government, like... making people like dumbing people down and making them docile with TV and the media, and then we find out about the cell phone thing, and that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, which I think is also partly why it's fun to have Captain America come back, a guy who hasn't been around for any of that, and so he's not distracted by anything, and he's just taking them out like he's a weapon, which is what he's designed to be. Which, by the way, the Captain America stuff here is different. There's lots of like random origin changes here and there in Ultimate Universe. Captain America here goes through like a whole program that's much more extensive than anything in like the original Operation Rebirth.
Have you heard from Eric?
I have not heard since he said he'd be right back.
Oh man,
not right back, but he should hopefully be back.
He's not. This is some new definition of right back that I wasn't previously. I hope he's able to get back in.
I hope so too, because I know he has a lot to say here. There's quite a bit to talk about with this, and there's quite a bit of stuff I want to make sure, because he wants to talk about Ultimates too, and I want to make sure we get all the setup stuff out of the way.
Yeah, and I would feel bad if we had talked about all the stuff that he wants to weigh in on before he comes back.
Yeah, definitely. But there's certainly a lot here. The Ultimate Universe really changes shape after this book, because with Spider-Man and X-Men, it's supposed to more so just be the idea of these characters have been around for 40 years, and we want some kind of like quick, fresh way to retell some of their classic stories and get people into the character. And then very quickly with this, it just changes. No, it's its own universe. It's its own thing. We're not going to try and like repeat things we've already done. We're just going to keep going forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which works and doesn't work depending on what you read. I think Fantastic Four starts really well and then gets really bad when it tries to do that. Spider-Man stays good for the most part. And then Ultimates goes downhill after Ultimates too. Ultimates is worth reading, and Ultimatum is awful.
I've always heard that, yeah, Vince has always complained about how awful Ultimatum is.
Yeah, Ultimatum is one of those things that you should not read.
Let's review it! Let's do it live! We'll do it live.
Yeah, let's do it live. Let's review the story that kills everyone. It even kills...
Well, I mean, you know... I mean, I love Infinity Gauntlet, but then, you know, it brings them back.
That's true. Infinity Gauntlet does bring them back. This is just they all die, and it's very depressing.
The end. Yeah, it's like the why can't I get that name? It's like Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yes,
everybody
dies. Exactly.
I really like the team name in this context outside of the umbrella of the Ultimate Universe, because you know, clearly it's, you know, we're going to move away from Avengers because it's its own universe, and the Ultimates is a very different thing from the Avengers. This is obviously the Avengers retooled and reinvented, but what sets them up in the first place is a very different thing, and the Avengers wasn't a government agency in the first place like this is, and all of that. The Ultimates is a great name for a thing that Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. creates in creating superheroes, because it sounds really sensationalist. It's like, we are the be-all, end-all, we can stop any threat, everybody's safe, and really are. We're just trying, again, PR thing. We're just trying to create the atmosphere that you're all going to be okay because we have the ultimate solution. I really like that.
Yeah, I mean it's very similar to, and a lot of things get thrown out as like being this thing's Dark Knight, but I feel like this book is very, very close to like what Frank Miller was trying to do with Dark Knight Returns, in that vein, with like everything being hyperliteral, like mutants and ultimates. Everything, like using things about the news and manipulation and like social paranoia. It seems like Millar is really able to channel some of that and sometimes make it work more than Miller, because this is one of those books that if you want to sit down and take your time with it, there's a lot to digest, but for like the first few issues, a lot of it's a lot of action. It's not especially wordy. And a lot of the ideas more so just come through like random dialogue exchanges when people are relaxing, as opposed to like big ideological conflicts and fights.
I also think that you're able to get away with having some of these characters not be as heroic. And I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting myself from earlier. Captain America is a little bit bothersome. I'm not sure how I feel about some of that, but this is basically like a superhero team that is compiled, that's put together like the Monkees. Because the Monkees was a rock band that was pulled together by a TV network for a TV show that were not actually, musicians before. I mean, they were able to, they knew how to play guitar, but they were but they were brought in more for their look than for anything. And this is similar in that these people are not necessarily heroes. We label them superheroes because they have superpowers, and again, we want to make the public think something particular about them. I love that idea of making the things in this literal, and because it's a thing that comic books do all the time. Often, especially, go back to Silver Age, they do all the time and don't really think about the implications of the fact that we're using literary terms inside of the reality of the fiction to describe things the way that people that are reading it would describe it, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, people in real life, if Magneto showed up, well, we might now because superhero movies are so popular, but there was a time where we wouldn't call Magneto a super villain. We talk about things in terms of heroes and villains in literature, not in reality. You wouldn't simplify it to that degree. You might in the media, But I think in this context that makes a whole lot of sense. Where we're spinning everything. So we're going to call the bad guys villains, and we're going to call the good guys heroes, and so we're going to create superheroes. Bruce Banner is brought in to create a new super soldier, and they're just going to find some soldier guy and give him the super soldier serum, and they're probably not going to do what Erskine did and make sure that he's got the right that he's got the heart for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and again, just to go back to what Eric was saying before about like this being very post 9/11 and kind of having that exact same idea of you have to very clearly, absolutely define the good and the bad, but that comes more from like perception issues than anything else. And so it's the Avengers of Stan Lee's day were very much moralizing, like as much as they had flaws and such. At the end of the day, you still got some kind of speech about what's good and what's bad. And Red Skull is still like ultimate evil, and Captain America was still ultimate good. And here, like you said before, it's not clear. Captain America is a character that you can't necessarily get a read on. Everyone in this book has some kind of political philosophy. And I know you guys did a GNN at one point about the idea of can you like something and not agree with it. And this is one of those books that really challenges that. We're like, I don't know if I like these Avengers because there's a lot of their politics that I just don't agree with. A lot of things I don't like about them as people. But is it still good from like a character story, political satire perspective?
That's a great point. And like I think that Mark Millar tends to write, as you said, satire and then cautionary tale before he's writing morality play.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric says he'll be back here in a minute.
Hopefully soon. Yeah, but no, you're right.
It's a tough time getting in. I keep trying to decide what, like, I'm avoiding certain things until he gets back.
Yeah, yeah, because Eric's gonna want to jump into like everything we talked about already, but like Millar is one of those guys who likes to exaggerate everything to a degree. Like it's very difficult to find any one of his stories that's just kind of, for the lack of a better word, human. Like most of everything that he does has some kind of either moral or political slant to it, or at least some kind of agenda. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. I don't like all of his things. I'm really hit or miss with him. But as with these two particular books, I think he's able to balance that more just because there's more characters and it doesn't feel like the book is like yelling one view at you. It's more about giving you a macro picture about it. Like when you go to read other things by him, like Nemesis or
Nemesis, that was like the first thing that came to my mind. Yeah.
One character. It's just this one person telling you what's right and wrong. And it's not that way with Ultimates. There's more people involved.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's straight up like Civil War was, where like here are two sides of an issue and we explore both and give them all their due. When I say Civil War, I mean the movie, not his Civil War. His Civil War does the opposite of what I'm talking about. But where you get, where you really get into both sides of an issue, and at the end of the day, it leaves it where it really explores both sides of it, and at the end of the day, gives you the opportunity to decide for yourself. I don't know if this is exactly that, but I don't think it's preaching something at you really.
Yeah, it either. Oh, Eric, go back. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's one particular view it wants to absorb. It feels like this is more like a scattershot critique of everything before it's like an endorsement of anything.
Yeah, I think so too. Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Sorry, we already covered all the interesting things, so.
Yep.
Okay.
About everything.
Well, can we talk about Iron Man armors?
Yes. Yes. I was hoping you'd bring that up.
No, we did not talk about everything. Let's go ahead and get into Iron Man as a character. I thought this was really odd because I found myself, as I was just saying a second ago with Steve, not sure how I felt at the end of the day about Captain America, and can't decide if he's even really a good person, if he's not kind of as much out for himself, or at least his own like worldview, as Tony Stark seems to be in the movies a lot of the time. And then I like this Tony Stark more than I like Captain America. It's completely flipped from where it is in the movies for me.
Well, can I talk about... because I think that's actually part of the entire idea of the story. I don't think any of the Ultimates are good or bad people. I feel like this story and the next one are very much built on this idea of people are far more complex than the simple idea of good or bad. The Ultimate Tony Stark isn't a great person, but he has something that is making him do good things. And I think that's true for all of the characters, is that I don't think the characters in this book are good or bad. I think they are people, and the idea of this book is exploring, okay, well, what if just a bunch of regular people got powers with the same kind of hang-ups and mental, distable abilities that people have.
See, that's really interesting because that's a little bit contrary to something Steve said about this before you came in.
Well, Steve was wrong.
Because Steve's kind of putting the satire in front of the characterization, and I'm saying it's straddling a line, and you're saying that it is trying to be a human drama, and it's not putting the satire in front of that. If it is, so it's weird. I'm in the middle of you guys, and Eric, if that is what it's trying to do, there are certain characters that he's just making too melodramatic, and I don't understand how they are as mean and awful as they are, especially Betty Ross. I don't think she's quite a real person. I think she's a little bit...
No, Betty Ross is entirely satirical, I think.
Yeah.
So that would be the big exception to what you're talking. And Hank Pym is not a good person, but he is more of a person than she is. Like I'm not saying that
and
he's
here's the
evil,
thing about Hank Pym.
Yeah.
Because you haven't read Ultimates 2 yet, I don't think Ultimate Hank Pym is a good person. I think Ultimate Hank Pym is a great character. I think he's one of the most nuanced and interesting characters in the way of, like, Game of Thrones, where like everyone's kind of terrible, but they're all kind of multifaceted. I think Ultimate Hank Pym is a really interesting character.
And I just haven't seen enough of him yet to get there, is what you're saying.
And Ultimate Bruce Banner is very similar in that he's almost unsympathetic in how pathetic he is.
But that's at least a characterization of him that I'm accustomed to and have seen in other things, because this has informed other versions of him and has played him in that way.
You will never see this Hank Pym again.
Not after the movies. Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Oh, that's my point. But this Bruce Banner is not exactly the movie Bruce Banner. Although that's one of the things that I wanted to mention in looking at how this shaped the movies, is that for a long time I thought that the choice for the change in Bruce Banner in Avengers was kind of based on nothing, and he looks a lot like this one.
Yeah, I can see that.
This one is definitely a lot skinnier and more sickly than the one in Avengers.
Yeah, but in the face, he looks a little more like a real nerdy scientist guy, and he's got that
I think he was
just a nerd guy.
Said, when they were doing the casting thing, I think he looks a lot more like Steve Buscemi.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a joke in the thing, and it's actually and hilariously is maybe the thing that makes him decide to go inject himself and turn into the Hulk.
And I do like the follow-up of what's so bad
things
about Steve Buscemi?
Yeah, he's like, is it something I said that way? He goes, that wasn't even insulting.
But yeah, I guess speaking to Tony, I think there's a lot of Ultimate Tony in the films. Normal Tony, in 616 Tony, is not as jokey and as, I guess, like, charming as this one is, and I think a lot of that went into Downey's performance.
I think there are also distinct differences between this one and in the movie one.
Oh, I'm not saying the movie is this one. I'm just saying, especially as a starting place.
Because I haven't read this stuff, how close is the characterization here to what was set up in Ultimate Iron Man by Card?
Well, Ultimate Iron Man's when he's a kid, so there's a good distance.
There's a lot of that gets retconned here too. Like Ultimate Iron Man's got a weird history in the way that 616 Iron Man's got a very complicated, naturally flowing history. Ultimate Iron Man's got a very inconsistent, constantly changing history.
According to Card, Tony Stark's entire body is a brain, and his skin is blue, and he paints himself to look like a person, and he's always in pain, which is why he drinks, because the only reason, or the only thing that can dull the pain is to be constantly drunk.
Oh.
So if you got that from this book, it's very consistent.
I did not get that from this book, so I guess we've gotten away from that a little bit.
Weird, right? Because if he has a brain tumor, does that mean his entire body is a tumor? Or like,
oh, that's a good point.
Ultimate Iron Man came after. Ultimate Iron Man contradicts this. This does not contradict Ultimate Iron Man.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what the history is at all, really, of publication, because I wasn't reading where this stuff was out.
Was it Ultimate Armor Wars that came in and then retconned a lot of what Card did? Or is it something else?
Ultimate Avengers does it quite a bit. That basically says all of the weird stuff from Card's run are just in the movie adaptation of Tony Stark's life.
Right, yeah. I knew that was Armor Wars or if it was Avengers.
Yeah, no, it's Ultimate Avengers.
Oh, come to think of it, that's another thing that may or may not be borrowing in the movies from this is the whole he's dying and he's got to do as much good as he can before he dies. Like, that's Iron Man 2.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a part of the character in general. What I like about the brain tumor is it's saved as a reveal. And it's
it was played as a reveal in that movie too, in that like he's actually, it's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. Well,
so I'm just saying in that way it's like that, but yeah.
I just meant like in the comic, I really like that he doesn't exactly come off as someone that actually cares about saving the world, and then you have this great conversation between him and Thor where he talks about like, yeah, I found out I could die at any moment. And I realized that if that's true, then I have to do the best I can.
Yeah, and impressively, he made me totally buy that they became best friends.
Yes, he does a great job with Tony and Thor as two people that have completely opposite worldviews but get along and are great friends.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to a lot of what Eric's points is about, like, these are being people first. Like, there's lots of complexities and contradictions within them, but that they acknowledge that. Like, Tony wants to do as much good as he can, but he's still both a superhero and a weapons manufacturer that is fueling one side of a conflict constantly. So, like, there's elements of things with, like, where Thor and Iron Man would very clearly disagree with each other. They're not telling each other everything, but again, they are just people. They're not trying to get into that debate.
Well, and I also like how they're opposites in that one of them, with Thor, is as powerful as he says he is, and nobody believes him. And Iron Man is not all attitude, but a lot attitude. One of my favorite moments in the whole series is toward the end when he wants to give up and not power his suit back up, and he says, "I'm not as smart as people think I am."
I love his. No one can be as
and that's
smart as
where
people
he
think
gets
I am.
really different from. That's where he gets really different from movie Tony Stark, who would never say that.
Yeah.
Movie Tony Stark would never say, "I'm not as smart as people think I am."
How do you feel aesthetically about the armor? I know you're not an armor person, but it's a very different look than pretty much any Iron Man armor before this.
I have no opinion on it because I remember when this stuff was around, or like looking at it, back at it later, like this being the ultimate Iron Man armor. So I knew what it looked like. So I guess I don't have an opinion about it.
Okay, I was just asking.
Because that's what cards look like too, I think, and that's the reason that I thought that this must have been building on that as opposed to the other way around.
Cards looks a little bit different, but yeah. There are subtle nuances that an Iron Man armor auteur would notice.
There's a little bit more realism to this one because Tony Stark's...
It looks like something that could work.
Tony Stark's classic armor always has this problem where there's the yellow skin and then there's like the red pieces that break off, and then we work around and say that the red pieces just kind of extend the yellow outwards, and like any sort of layer of skin is just folding back into the armor, or the entire armor is that, and it's just a matter of how it comes off his body. Here, it's multiple individual pieces that are put together by a team. Like it's very much like he's almost like in like a NASCAR race, and he has to do several pit stops in the middle of fights. And I've always kind of liked the design for that reason. I always thought it was funny that Iron Man would be this big, free-spirited kind of guy that's always like flying around doing his thing, but to get in and out of that armor, he constantly needs people.
Well, it's very. I want to assume there's an inspiration from Evangelion, where Evangelion was a super robot show, but the robots require an entire team to prepare, and even when they go out to fight, they're connected by like a power cord. And if that power cord ever becomes unplugged, they only have like 3 minutes before the robot shuts down. And Ultimate Iron Man kind of works like that, where like you see when the armor first opens, there are these big batteries there, and like he talks about like, if I fly all the way to our destination, this armor is going to be dead when we get there. Like I have to ride in the plane.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of that, and it also helps that this one doesn't have like an arc reactor or like a renewable source of power constantly working with the suit. It really is just an uninvention, and it also fixed the Iron Man classic problem of if he can build that suit and use it whenever he pleases, why doesn't he just give everyone suits like that, right? Like police suits like that?
Yeah, it's certainly not something that seems specifically cost-effective.
That's a good point, and it's also consistent with his character thing of people thinking that he's smarter than he is, because he's got he's got that constant limitation. There's also that talk about how he's got a force field and his force field doesn't work right. And I was not accustomed to seeing an Iron Man that was this limited.
It's a fun callback because back in the day with Iron Man armors, you used to have you used to know issue to issue this is his limited arsenal, and given any situation, he will use one of these 5 gadgets to get out of the situation, and we don't do that anymore, except for maybe this.
We've only got a few minutes left before I've got to get going. Eric, should we go ahead and talk about the really disturbing, shocking Hank Pym, Janet Pym domestic violence thing?
Yeah. I think that scene, it's not something I ever really noticed when I first read it, but rereading it for this, I think that scene is amazingly choreographed. Because what happens is he gets angry and hits her and then immediately apologizes, and then she grabs a frying pan and hits him.
It's a radio.
It's a radio. Yeah, she hits him with something big and hard. And then the fight escalates, and she has this line where she says, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have started this." And by that point, he's just completely gone. And I think saying you shouldn't have made me feel small is a little on the nose. But what I love about that fight is that it kind of looks like she escalates that fight, and then the next issue, we're told, no, this has been their relationship from college forward, and that she's just accustomed to this, and she's just reacting to. I think it's really, really well done. I mean, as far as a domestic abuse can be well done.
Yeah.
Well, you understand the psychology of both people, and you don't typically get that, right? It's a thing where we understand why Hank Pym has this complex and why he hits her, and we understand to a degree why she stays with him despite that. We don't usually focus in that much detail there because it's not a comfortable subject.
Yeah, and one isn't made totally the victim, but in having the other person having major flaws and staying in that relationship and all of that, we're also not making it okay that Hank Pym is doing what he's doing. They're both in the wrong, but he's decisively more wrong than she is.
Well, and he gets his comeuppance when Cap goes after him.
Yeah, which is interesting because that's still more about Cap than it is about Hank Pym. Than it is about.
Well, and I love that Janet scolds him for it.
Yeah, I mean,
that she's you're the knight in shining armor, aren't you?
Yeah, I like that. I don't like the way that scene ends. I do think that he keeps. I don't think Mark Millar is good at writing women. Can I just say that? I don't like the dialogue he gives her in a lot of places. It feels like a guy trying to understand a woman in an abusive relationship and doesn't.
Black Widow's a little bit like that too.
Yeah.
I like the ideas behind it, and I like the characterization, but I wish somebody else would come. It's not the choices, it's the words behind them, and that makes her unsympathetic in a way she doesn't need to. When you get to the end of that, and she does this very CW, she would have walked out of the room if she had the strength to thing, where she's like, oh, Cap, you're just making it worse, leave. That whole thing was taking it too far.
How did you feel about the whole thing where Ultimate Thor might be crazy? Because that was a super big deal when this series first came out.
I love that.
It was such an interesting and different take on that character.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I mean, obviously, this is an old enough story that I knew pretty well that he wasn't, so it's not like it duped me into thinking that maybe he was a crazy person. What I didn't get was, okay, so he's able to demonstrate his powers. He is able to make lightning and change the weather at a whim, but the idea that he could take a bomb and teleport it to another dimension, that's crazy. That's going too far for people. People aren't buying that he could do that.
Well, we get more into it in the second one, you'll see in the second one, but we kind of explore how his powers could be scientifically based, and that he could just be crazy. That keeps going into the second one. We are not completely convinced at the end of this.
Okay, yeah. I like that. That's really cool. But regardless of what you think it is and whether or not he's crazy, I wasn't sure I bought that people wouldn't think, okay, he's got these powers. He's been able to prove that he can do certain things that are amazing and impossible to explain. Why couldn't he also do that? Maybe, but it's not possible.
Well, they accept that he could teleport it. It's the idea that he could put it in another dimension that won't affect them at all. because they say, like, okay, so
Yeah.
if he moves it into space, it's still going to detonate.
And I guess the problem, too, is that Tony Stark is just taking that at face value and believing it and doesn't really have a backup plan. He says he has a plan. He's like, this is our other plan, but, like, that's kind of his plan, right? And so, you're right.
I
that is
love
kind of a problem.
when Black Widow's like, when, like, Black Widow kisses him, and she's like, this is, or he's like, what's that for? She's like, it's for sacrificing yourself. He's like, what are you talking about?
That
I'm
was
not
another thing, is that that's great, because that's the flip of what happens in the Avengers movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Where, like, the space sacrifice is actually brought up.
Well, and it should be noted that the Marvel Universe, the cinematic universe, the whole idea of the Avengers being a government-run and created organization, that comes from here.
Yeah, go to the Triskelion and all that stuff. A lot of Nick Fury's characterization comes.
Triskelion and
Triskelion. Do you guys mind if I go down my list real quick?
Sure.
I made a list. Here it is. A couple of these we've talked about already. Now, some of these things might be things that are also in 616 that I just don't know about, but some of this is but this is all stuff that just reminded me of the movie, so I wrote it down. Captain America doesn't wear a parachute. They make a big deal out of that at the beginning of Winter Soldier.
Oh, yeah?
I think that's a thing that happens with Captain America, but I think we talk about it in the Ultimates.
Yeah, there's never a moment in the comics where, like, they address the fact Cap doesn't need a parachute. He just kind of jumps into places.
And obviously the costume in First Avenger is similar.
First Avenger, and then the World War II costume got similarities to the World War II First Avenger costume.
Yeah.
Shield's,
That's what I meant, was the World War II costume.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Shield and Nick Fury's rampant paranoia about making sure that he's safe at all times is in Winter Soldier with his car, and you've got that long scene where he's talking about all the precautions they take when he goes into a restaurant, like the food being tasted by somebody, and the cameras in his wardrobe and all of that
his wardrobe's
stuff.
Completely replaced.
That reminded me a little bit of Winter Soldier. There's another of those interesting coincidences is that we have a big Star Wars reference in this, and this is years and years before Disney will buy Marvel or Star Wars. And I'm just bringing that up because I'm sure there are plenty of Marvel things that have done that, but this is an Avengers thing. It's a thing that informs the Avengers movies really hard, and we can't get through a single Marvel movie now without at least one Star Wars reference. Sorry, what?
No, I just said yeah.
Just like in Avengers, Banner is brought in for his scientific expertise rather than to become the Hulk.
Yep.
And I was kind of impressed with it for having him there and then coming up with an excuse to keep him there, because the first thing I thought of when they found Captain America, because the whole reason he's brought in is to create a super soldier. And as soon as they brought in Captain America, I was like, why don't they just get rid of him? Like, there's no reason for Banner to be here now. And then, oh, he's a doctor and he does doctor things.
Well, and he's trying to replicate the formula from Captain America's blood.
Which is the thing we do in MCU a lot. We're trying to replicate that formula through Captain America's blood. And
Oh, that's
616, it's typically more just figure out what they did as opposed to using Captain America.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And then, of course, he takes advantage of it and injects himself. And then there's the Robert Downey Jr. line. Specifically, it is, take it easy, Cap. This nose has been smashed more times than Robert Downey Jr. Wow, I just can't even believe that that's in this book. 6 years before that movie. That's amazing. And then the Sam Jackson thing.
Like his name being dropped in Ultimates. I remember reading a lot of articles about that at the time.
Yeah. Interesting that Sam Jackson would cast Johnny Depp to play Tony Stark.
That's actually because Johnny Depp is Brian Hitch's model for drawing Tony Stark.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. And of course,
also the Freddie Prinze Jr. The Freddie Prinze Jr. scene. Whedon bought that page where the Hulk says "must kill Freddie Prinze" or Hulk kill Freddie Prinze Jr. or whatever, and gave it to Freddie Prinze Jr. at his and Sarah Michelle Gellar's wedding.
Oh, that's awesome. That panel is hilarious.
Yeah.
That was the first place, because may I say that like I said earlier, I wasn't really expecting it to get as adult and disturbing as it did, and like I think you could read the first 2 issues of this and think that it's not kid-friendly, but at least, okay for, like, preteens. And then suddenly Hulk starts talking about how badly he wants to get back together with Betty, and it gets, like, wrong. And I was like, oh, that's where we're going to go that far. Okay.
This Hulk, because there's a lot of different takes on the Hulk, this Hulk is very specifically all of Banner's dark, repressed urges.
Yes. Exactly. And it's interesting because he's not the kind of Hulk, and I haven't read Ultimates too, so I don't know where they go with it, but at least here, he's not the kind of Hulk that sees himself as completely separate from Banner, and he's trying to get revenge on people for wronging Banner. He doesn't hate Banner like he does in other things.
There is a huge scene in Ultimates 2 that's going to blow your mind that's in the comic book, and that the movies didn't come up with it. I'm just going to say that.
Wow, okay. I'm looking forward to it. Hulk, the Hulk fight happens in Harlem, specifically. That's the Incredible Hulk fight.
I didn't even catch that.
And then, as I said, the Nazis invading and taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of from the inside is with the Chitauri is sort of like Hydra in movies.
Well, and also the Chitauri.
Yeah, and of course the Chitauri, right? I have that listed as well, and then
who are completely
and then, like I said, the whole idea
because they're Skrulls.
Yeah, and they look totally different, and it's hard not to read this and think, well, that would have been more interesting.
Yep.
It would have been a different movie if you had them be shapeshifter things. Like, they obviously just needed an alien race of, like, expendable people that you could... But they're expendable in this, too, so, you could have made them shapeshifters, I guess. And then, like I said, the idea of Iron Man sacrificing himself in space comes up and then ends up not being what we do at all, which is hilarious.
How do you feel about...
So, yeah, that's
Black Widow and Hawkeye? Because the movie versions are very clearly very inspired by this, specifically Hawkeye.
Yeah, well, like I was telling Steve earlier, I had to really rush my reading of the last few issues when they show up, so I don't have really an opinion of them yet. But yeah, I mean, they do remind me of the movie version, certainly.
Well, Hawkeye has a family.
Oh, is that brought up?
In the costume?
I don't even remember that.
He's got a kids and a girlfriend in this, and then we go more into that later with Ultimates 2.
Yeah, well, they tell us that every time before he goes on a mission, he calls his family and says goodbye.
Oh yeah, that's Age of Ultron.
Because it might be the last time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of echoed in Age of Ultron.
Well, folks, what else do you want to mention? Because I've got to get going for another show here.
The whole Chitauri Skrull thing, according to the commentary, because the version I have has like a commentary in the back by Millar and Hitch, was because Bill Jemas thought Skrull sounded dumb, and I quote, he said, "You boys are smarter than that. You can come up with something better."
That's
so
hilarious.
Chitauri, I love to take a poll of people that have never heard of either and be like, what sounds like a better alien race, Chitauri or Skrull?
Chitauri is actually it's actually, I think it's an African word that does in fact describe a like shape-shifting like mythological creature. So like he didn't even like just invent that word.
It doesn't sound like an inventive word.
That is interesting.
But neither do a lot of Star Trek races, and then they turn out.
I guess my biggest thing is one of the things about Ultimates is I always think of Ultimates as just being okay, and that like I really love Ultimates 2. Ultimates 1 is just okay. You have to read it to get to Ultimates 2, and then every time I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good on its own. Like I always forget that, and I think the Ultimates is kind of slowly being forgotten, and I just kind of want to remind everyone the Ultimates is really good, and you should go read it.
The Ultimate Universe as a whole is one of those things that died so quickly after it began with some of the worst stories we've ever gotten in Marvel Comics that it's hard to like convince people to like no, go back and read these specific issues of Ultimate Fantastic Four or these specific issues of Ultimate X-Men or these specific issues of Ultimates in general. So reviewing this is good because I want to make sure people buy some more of that stuff because I like a lot of it.
Well, and that's part of the problem of the way the Ultimate Universe was, was invented because it was meant to be a reinvention for specifically like teenagers or young adults reading that that didn't want to have to go back to the old stuff. So it was kind of a big update thing. Yeah, it was for new readers, and that makes it very much for specifically that time period. So even if there's a lot of stuff you can go back to and still get a lot out of it now, it feels old to people, and so they're not.
And it's also kind of been replaced by the movies for that purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's a totally
the thing that the movies are going to have in their favor moving forward with people going back to them 20, 30 years from now is that they're movies. Yeah. And that people grew up with them, and movies being in the cinema immediately legitimizes things over comics, which is because like you would think that you'd kind of want to after a generation or two like update again maybe if you wanted to use those characters again and not keep recasting them in the same universe. It's gonna be really interesting to see where that goes with the movies. But
I feel like as a story and as it's told and drawn, I think Ultimates holds up. I think it's something that somebody could go back and read today. You have to be aware 9/11 just happened, and you have to be aware there's a lot of pop culture references.
You have to have some social context, and I do have to say I'm glad I was an adult already when this came out. Like I think I feel like I appreciated it more having been an adult, having I was in high school when this came out. Like I feel like I appreciate this more, like having this time period pretty fresh in my mind and having already been pretty much an adult when it came out than like if I handed this to like a 20-year-old now.
There's a lot of stuff where like it puts you back in that mindset of when some of these things were happening. Like President Bush is in this book, and he has a bigger role in the second book, and there's lots of like the way news anchors are talking, or like the news stories around the time of like scares in the news about like anthrax and stuff. Like there's lots of social paranoia at the time that
Larry King is in this.
Reads completely differently.
Larry King is in everything.
Larry King is in everything.
Well, anyway, I think that's going to be it for us tonight. Thanks as always for watching, and as I said, I enjoyed this. I think overall it's pretty good.
We're gonna do two in like 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
That's the plan. Okay, good. I can't wait because that book gets darker and more political, and I can't wait.
It's gonna be fun. I'm excited.
I'm gonna give myself more time to read it.
You should. That's a book you need to sit on.
Yeah.
I'll be propped up slightly more because I'll be sitting on that book.
Get a round pillow as opposed to like a square one like this. You need round ones.
I need round pillow. Okay. All right. Everybody, thanks always for watching. Be sure to appreciate it. We'll see you, like Eric said, in a couple weeks for Ultimates 2. And here for lots more videos this week. We've got more Powerpuff Girl month stuff coming. And 0 Hour returns on Sunday night at 8 Central with me and the panel talking about geeky news from the previous week. Thanks again for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and this was Eric.
I am Eric.
And Steve.
He was Eric.
Were you Steve, or are you Steve?
Could be a Chitauri, you never know.
And I am, and was, and ever shall be Captain Logan saying good night, good night.